Welcome to Season 8, Episode 26 of the Ubuntu Podcast. In this episode, we're going to be discussing the impact of Chrome. We'll also have some command line love and go over your feedback. I'm Mark, and joining me this week are Alan.
Hello, hello.
Laura.
Hello.
And Martin.
Good evening.
So what have you been up to, Martin?
I finished my jury service now.
Oh,
Hurrah, finally.
And, yes, finally. Yeah, that was a long stint, actually. And so I've been burning through some podcasts, on the bus and what have you. And I discovered Third World Linux. And I went back a few months and I've been listening to some back episodes of that with AG and Zhao, who are based in the Philippines. And it's an interesting take on, Linux and the perspective from being in the third world. It puts things in a stark contrast to, how I sort of consider things. And they're running a season at the moment where they're looking at whether distributions are third worldable. And this is their definition. And they've created some criteria as to whether a distribution is third worldable. And I contacted them and asked them to take a look at Ubuntu Mate, and they've recently reviewed that. So if you're interested, you can go and have a listen to the Third World Linux podcast. But spoiler alert, I'm pleased to say that Ubuntu Mate is third worldable.
And following on from last week, that's 2 minutes we've got into the show before Martin has mentioned Ubuntu Mate. Well done, Martin.
Yeah, I'm on fire. I'm getting in quick this time, yeah. And I've also been in contact with SpiderOak about SpiderOak 1, which is their new updated version of their file syncing utility, which is got zero knowledge encryption and all the rest. And they've been extremely helpful in helping to get that integrated with Ubuntu Mate, and I was really impressed with how promptly they responded and helped with that whole process. So there's an organisation I would wholeheartedly recommend. And then just recently I've got a Nexus 9, and it's lovely. I'm really happy with that.
Did you know that runs 64-bit Android?
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
One of the very few devices that runs 64-bit Android, apparently.
You can tell as well.
Oh, really?
It's very responsive.
We shall talk about that another day.
Okay.
Alan, what have you been doing?
Who?
You. Alan, the one of you that's called Alan.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. I have been helping community people to get LibreOffice working on Ubuntu phone as part of the Doc Viewer application. So that when you click on a document of any kind that is supported by LibreOffice, it will open on the phone.
Cool. So this isn't like that Convergence video where they had the desktop version of LibreOffice in a really small window on a phone, is it?
Kind of. But
Okay.
if someone emails you something and says, "Can you just check this?"
Yeah.
and you just absolutely have to open it because you're away from your desk,
Yeah.
then sometimes you just want to be able to open that file on your phone. And
Yes.
it might not be the most suitable device for typing your resume or your thesis, but it's good for just viewing, and that's why we wanted to have a viewer.
Right. I guess it doesn't have all the toolbars and menus and stuff crammed
It has
into the
nothing.
window.
It's just a window
just a
with
viewer.
your document inside it. Yes.
Cool.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when it's convergent and you've got a viewer, you can plug it into your presentation equipment and use it as your presentation tool, can't you? Which I think satisfies a requirement of Stuart Langridge, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah, I'm only doing this for him. There's nobody
are.
else wants this, just him.
He shouts the loudest, maybe.
Always.
Laura, what have you been doing?
Watching a lot of Sports Night.
What on earth is Sports Night?
The West Wing.
Nope. Sorry.
You are aware there's this thing called TV, and on TV there is this program called West Wing.
A program called The West Wing, which
You've
I've never watched.
watched The West. Oh my!
I'm with Mark.
never
I've no
watched
idea
it.
what we're talking
I've never
about.
watched it either.
Have none of you ever watched?
So assuming I know what West Wing is, what's Sports Night?
You people are just like you people. Oh my
Wow.
god! You've honestly.
I've never run in a park either.
Yeah, Laura, you're going to be
Almost like
spending
with
4
different
hours in a
people.
car with us in a few weeks,
Yeah.
so
It's alright. I like metal more than Palfy does.
Awesome.
So The West Wing is probably the best TV show
It
that's
can't
ever
be.
come out of America. everything else is good, but it's always, but it's not quite the West Wing. Anyway, Sports Night was prior to West Wing by the same person, Aaron Sorkin, and you have got to watch the West Wing.
Okay, all right, calm down.
Oh my goodness.
Hey Mark, save us from this.
Hello. What
have you been doing?
What have I been doing? I went on holiday to Poland.
Oh, yeah.
Where'd you go?
How nice.
Poland.
Wow. What did you do in Poland?
I drank lots of vodka.
Like you do?
Ate lots of pierogi.
What's pierogi?
Pierogi?
They're these little dumplings which they do out there, like little steamed or fried dumplings. And it was the annual pierogi festival when we were in Krakow.
That's convenient.
Yeah. So they had like about 30 stalls selling pierogi with various things in, and we ate lots of those. And then we went to a wedding. Now, as any of our Polish listeners will know, I assume we've got Polish listeners, I don't know, a Polish wedding is basically an endurance event where you have up to 2 days worth of doing shots of vodka, eating food, dancing, repeat. So that was an experience.
And you're still alive.
And
so
I'm still
great.
alive.
Well done.
Yes.
Pierogi sound amazing.
They are really good.
Should we get on with it?
Yes.
So about 7 years ago, the browser that everyone used as the alternative to Internet Explorer was Firefox. And then Chrome came along with its open source counterpart, Chromium. And this has kind of prompted a major shift in the design and functionality of browsers. And so after 7 years of Chrome existing, does anyone still care about Firefox?
Yes.
Hasn't everyone just moved on and stopped using Firefox and now using Chrome or Chromium?
I use Firefox basically all the time.
Yeah.
I use it a little bit when I need a second browser.
Yes, I am the same. It's my backup browser. I used to use Firefox as the primary browser, and then Chrome came along, and I'm one of those people who are guilty of saying, well, this tool is better, I'm going to switch, and it's better in measurable ways. But unfortunately, it's like Commodore versus Sinclair, Betamax versus VHS. People are very camped in one of those two browsers. Or you get the weirdos using Opera, and they're in another little camp on their own. And people are, dedicated to that one browser and will defend it to the hilt. I find many people are, which is a bit bizarre.
I'm not one of those people. I've actually switched between Firefox and Chrome a couple of times. And I'll explain why. When Chrome first came along, and I can't remember if Chrome was a thing or if it was just Chromium back then, but around 2009, early 2010, I switched to it. And that was really because its JavaScript performance was light years ahead of Firefox. And we had a project at work where we needed to do some really sexy stuff in the browser with JavaScript, and Firefox just didn't cut the mustard. So I started using Chrome then and stuck with it for a long time and didn't switch away from Chrome until early last year, when I started noticing that lots of websites and sort of major websites didn't render or work correctly in Chrome, but they worked perfectly fine in Firefox. And some of the examples are eBay, where you need to install an extension in Chrome for eBay to work correctly. And more recently, I've noticed that LinkedIn doesn't work correctly under Chrome, and I don't know if there's an extension for it because I didn't look. I just switched back to Firefox. So I've switched back to Firefox because all the websites work correctly without having to install extensions, and I can't help but feel installing extensions into a proprietary browser is a bit like where we were with, Internet Explorer and ActiveSync 6, 7, 8 years ago.
So you're saying you thought Chrome was better for measurable reasons, but certain small specific use cases caused you to switch to Firefox.
Well, in the interim period, Firefox's JavaScript performance has caught up considerably, and for my use of a browser, I really can't see the difference between Chrome and Firefox. There's only one thing that I absolutely use Chrome for, and that's Netflix. And I'm really rooting because I have to, yeah. And I'm really rooting for Firefox to complete its implementation of encrypted media extensions, so that I don't have to rely on Chrome for even that. And some of the developments that are coming along with Firefox to have it compete more directly with Chrome, I'm all behind, and I really want to see come to fruition.
So I would flip flop between Chrome or Chromium and Firefox. I would spend like 3 months on one, 6 months on one, and then flip to the other. And generally, what would trigger me to switch would be crashiness, and data loss. And I had multiple occasions where one or either browser would crash and take my profile with it, and then I'd have to start all over again with a new profile and have to sign into all my favorite websites and recreate all my bookmarks and, favorite websites and all that kind of stuff. And I tried it again a few months back. I flipped from Chrome to Firefox and found it incredibly painful using Firefox on a daily basis. I had crashes of Flash in the browser, and everyone went, remove Flash. So I thought, okay, yeah, that's a reasonable thing to say, remove Flash or block it in some way. So I removed Flash. Then Firefox would explode because adverts would not be able to play their Flash plugin in order to play their adverts. So they would fall back to the H.264 video, and they'd play a little video in where the advert would be. And that would crash the browser. And it was, I've filed a bug. I've got a bunch of crash reports on the Mozilla Bugzilla thing. And that just drove me nuts. And whenever I asked anyone for help, the general consensus was, oh, you've got too many extensions. You've got rubbish extensions. Oh, you're probably visiting the wrong websites. It was never really particularly helpful. And that kind of made me rage quit a little bit, because I thought, well, if your answer is I'm doing it wrong and telling me I've got the wrong extensions, when I've had to disable Flash, and actually I had to remove the Cisco contributed H.264 player in Firefox. I had to surgically remove that, because you can't actually flip a switch and turn that off. I had to surgically remove that, and still the thing would crash. And so I just gave up, and I only use Firefox when I need to tunnel through a VPN and, bypass proxies and stuff.
So I did actually have that exact same experience with Firefox a couple of versions ago, so you can be happy at least that it's not just you.
Oh, good.
But I did, basically I've done a similar thing to what you two have both described, in that I've moved back and forth a couple of times between Firefox and Chromium. And now I use Chrome if I need to watch Netflix or something else which needs its like proprietary implemented only stuff. But other than that, I use Firefox pretty much exclusively, except for when I'm doing testing at work, because I need to do cross-browser testing, and also Chrome is faster for running automated tests. But, the reason that I stuck with Firefox in the first place was because I relied heavily on a number of plugins which at the time didn't exist for Chrome. And really, I've never found a compelling reason to switch. And, the thing that always bugs me about Chrome and Chromium is when you start it and it wants you to log into your Google account. And I don't really want to do all my browsing logged into my Google account, because I don't need to, and it's sort of a weird thing for my browser to be asking. It makes me feel like it's all a bit creepy. I'd much rather my browser was just being a dumb terminal to the web.
Yeah, I am logged into my Google account regardless of which browser I'm using, because it's just convenient, and I do use Firefox Sync, and I find that to be a really useful tool. And I've heard, people talking about Firefox being crashy and unstable, but in all the time I've used it, I've never had it crash on me once or corrupt my profile. I have...
You've never had it crash at all?
Never.
Wow.
Never. And I do have to sort of test it because it's the default browser in a distro that I look after. So that's one of the reasons why I use it to sort of dog food the distro and make sure that, there's nothing horribly broken. And I'm not going to mention the name for being ridiculed by my co-presenters.
Don't worry, you've already done that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I like to get it in. Yeah, Ubuntu Mate. But yeah, the crashing it, and admittedly I don't use many extensions, but I don't think it's extensions that are making my browsing experience more stable. It's just been reliable for me.
I don't use many extensions on either, I'd think, as far as I remember anyway. I actually do use Firefox as my main browser at work because that's the supported browser. But as I say, I use Chrome as well because it's just easier to have my personal stuff logged in Chrome and my work stuff logged in Firefox. And actually, I think Chrome crashes more on balance. And at home, I only use Chrome, and that does crash occasionally. So in my limited sample, I would say Firefox is actually more stable. But despite that, I use Chrome all the time.
So what's coming up in Mozilla that, significant changes that are keeping it up to date with Chrome that seems to be running away with their market share?
Well, one of the big things they're working on at the moment is a project they're calling electrolysis, which is, at the moment, Firefox runs everything in the same process, whereas Chrome runs separate processes for each tab and possibly each extension, I think, depending on what the extension's doing. And this is basically going to implement that in Firefox, which should make things more stable, because if an advert tries to do something on a page, then causes a crash, then that should only take out that tab rather than the entire browser and your profile with it.
Yeah, I remember this being a really big deal when it got introduced in Chrome.
Yeah. But the thing that surprises me is I've heard people say they just simply won't consider using Firefox because it doesn't have this. I mean, no one seemed to worry too much before Chrome existed and had this, but it's a really big deal now that it exists.
Right, and I can understand that because, if I've got a browser that's got 20 tabs open and one of them goes fut.
Only 20?
Yeah, on a good day. If I've just started working, then, and one tab goes fut. I don't want it to take the whole browser out and every document that I was in the middle of editing and every web page I was currently reviewing or whatever. It's just annoying. And frustrating.
It's more annoying
for
you
problem.
Because you have a million tabs and I have 3
No,
tabs.
I don't. I used to, but actually the tab suspender that I use has helped immensely with that.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah. I can understand why people really like the idea of one process per tab. It also makes finding the offending tab a lot easier.
This is
because
true, yes.
With Firefox, I find, something is running away and the Firefox process is a bazillion % of my CPU. My fan is blaring and I have no idea which tab it is that's doing it. Whereas at least with Chrome, I can look at the process inspector thing inside Chrome and match that with a process ID at the command line, and I can just nuke the process from orbit and actually see which tab it is that was causing that. So if it's a tab that had like a Google Doc in that was like being edited by 500 people and it was going mad and the JavaScript was like eating a CPU, then I can just close that tab. But if I've got 20 tabs open and I don't know which one it is, then yeah, it's a little bit frustrating. So I'm kind of surprised that people aren't quite so enthused about that. But I guess if you didn't have it, then you don't miss it.
Yeah, I suppose that's what it is. Yeah. So another thing that they're working on is the new Web Extensions API, which we mentioned briefly last week. It's a JavaScript-focused API for writing extensions, which is largely compatible with that used by Blink, which is the engine that drives Chrome, Chromium, and Opera.
So when you say largely compatible, that means largely compatible from a developer point of view. Creating an extension wouldn't be so much work to make a Firefox and a Chrome version, right?
Exactly, yes. It sounds like it's just like a few modifications to turn a Chrome extension into a Firefox extension and vice versa.
I think that's a really smart idea.
Which does sound like a really smart idea. And married to this development is that they'll be deprecating Zool, which was the language previously used to write Firefox extensions and indeed Firefox itself. And in fact, what goes along with this is previously a Firefox extension, because of the way that it used Zool, which Firefox itself uses, it meant that an extension can do anything to the browser at all. And I believe that under the new Web Extensions API, they will be slightly more limited in what they can do, so they can't just completely rewrite the browser, which is probably a good idea. I mean, there are probably a few things which will be which won't be possible, which are currently possible with extensions, in the same way that there are things in Chrome which you can't do with an extension.
Right.
I suspect it'll be slightly less restrictive than Chrome, because I think there are probably things you can't do in Chrome because Google doesn't want you to be able to do them rather than for technical reasons. But that sounds like a good idea to me.
Is this enough? Is it enough to turn the fortunes of Mozilla around? Part of me thinks not, partly because the number one shipping laptops have Chrome pre-installed. The number one shipping mobile devices have Chrome pre-installed. So their user base and semi lock-in with features like signing into your Chrome profile so that it synchronizes across your devices, which is a compelling feature. That being able to visit a page on your desktop and then walk out of the office and think, oh, what was that page I was on? I was looking at something earlier I want to show someone. Opening your browser and press a button that says show me the tabs that I've got open on other computers, and it just show them to you, is quite a nice feature. And because they've got that pre-installed on Chromebooks that we've talked about, some episodes ago, and mobile devices, it's very difficult for Firefox to catch up unless there was some kind of Firefox OS based. I'm not taking the mick, like a laptop. If there was a Linux laptop that was the size and shape of a Chromebook but was Firefox instead, then they might have a chance. And if there was a mobile phone that was as popular as Android that had Firefox instead, then they may have a chance.
So what you're saying is that Google are engaging in the same anti-competitive behaviour that Microsoft engaged in about 10 years ago.
I don't think I'm saying that. It's very difficult for Firefox to catch up when the others are so far ahead.
Yeah. No, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think these changes are going to help Firefox stay relevant to the people it's still relevant for. Whether it's going to claw back any market share, it remains to be seen. I don't think it's going to be a magic bullet, certainly. I think they would need something in the way of killer features.
And revenue. They need money as well to keep the project going. And when, Chrome gives revenue to Google, and Google are no longer giving, much revenue to Firefox for their search results that are getting redirected through Google, then because they're now going to Yahoo in some regions, that gives them even less money to be able to innovate.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be a big job for people to port from Zool to the new JavaScript format?
That's a good question.
For developers.
I think it depends on. I think there's like a newer SDK which some people are using to develop extensions, and that stuff will. I don't think there's going to be much work to do to port that at all. I think its older extensions are going to be a bit more work. I don't know how much because I've never written a Firefox extension.
We've spoken about Firefox versus Chrome, essentially. And as Linux users, it's unlikely that Chrome will be the default browser in the distributions that we use, given that it's proprietary.
Yeah.
So how does Chrome stack up against Chromium? Is Chromium just as compelling as Chrome?
Well, you don't get the Flash and I was going to say Silverlight, the encrypted media extensions stuff in Chromium.
You don't get the PDF viewer either.
Oh, do you not?
Oh, okay.
I thought they did. I thought they added that.
I thought that was
it
all
is
under proprietary
No, I think the PDF thing works in Chromium now. So yeah, there's the proprietary nonsense that you get in the proprietary browser that you don't get in the free software browser. That's, that's a given.
Yeah.
But then Google gives an awful lot of love to Chrome in terms of packaging and testing and delivering updates. So, all you got to do if you're on a Debian-based system is add a line that, well, you don't even need to do that. You just need to download Chrome at one point and install it, and it will auto-magically add an archive link to your, your list of PPAs or whatever, and you're up to date. You're done. So whenever they ship an update, you get it via your normal update manager. Whereas Chromium, it's up to the distro makers to update their packages, and so it's a constant, chase of keeping Chromium up to date. For all of the distro makers.
Much like it is with Firefox.
Yeah, but comparing Chromium to Chrome.
Oh yeah, sorry, no,
which
right,
is what your question
which is
was.
What we're asking
is
about,
that is that's one of the differences. It's a relentless chase, and Google is a giant machine that pays people to keep Chrome up to date in a way that everyone can keep their machines up to date, and they don't do that. I mean, it's very gracious that a lot of that work they do is open source in Chromium, but they don't pay people to keep Chromium up to date in all the distros. That's up to us, and that's work, and someone's got to do that, and someone's got to pay for that.
Okay, so that's a distinction between how the two are packaged and delivered to us Linux users. But in terms of usability, is Chromium much better than Firefox, if that's your position, as Chrome is, or is it different enough that it doesn't compete?
So if I had to rank them in order, I'd probably put Chrome at the top, Chromium in the middle, and Firefox at the bottom in terms of functionality, usability, and crashability.
And so if you were making a decision about the default browser in a distribution, you would have Chromium edge over Firefox.
If there was resources dedicated to keeping up to date, yes.
Yeah.
And dealing with bugs and all that kind of stuff, because there are some weird rendering differences between Chrome and Chromium. I've seen fonts render slightly differently and that's quite a big thing when you're looking at text on web pages.
I think that's actually probably the first thing I notice whenever I run Chrome is that the fonts look different.
Right. So, yeah, I'd be interested to know what other people think and why they chose the browser that they chose. Maybe use Firefox or Chrome or Chromium or something else. Maybe you're one of those outliers who use Opera or Vivaldi or whatever these other Midori or Web or whatever the
Conqueror.
Yes.
Links.
Should we not spend the rest of the show listing browsers?
Quoting browser names, yeah.
We could do, but, it might be tedious. Let us know, and email us, show@ubuntupodcast.org to let us know your feedback.
And now, Command Line Love.
Oh, my favourite bit.
This one comes.
This week, Mark?
Sorry?
What is it this week, Mark?
This one comes from Chris, who says, if you like Bash's Control R feature, you will love HSTR. We'll put the link to the GitHub distro repo in the show notes. It's like Control R, but on steroids. So essentially you install this and you add it to your Bash RC. And normally what happens in Bash is when you've typed some commands and you think, what was that command I typed before? I remember a few letters from it, but I don't remember the whole thing. You can press Control R and then type some of the letters, and it'll search back through your history and give you at the prompt something that matches what you typed in, and you can keep pressing Control R and cycle through the matches. What this does is it actually gives you a nice list of your history, which you can then filter live on the command line, find the one you want from all of the matches, which you can see all together, and you can favorite them, you can remove them from your history. I'm not sure if you can edit them. Oh, you can put them on the command line and then edit them, or you can just run them straight away.
That's rather cool.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I have to say, I've been really lazy of late, and I've been using the fish shell to sort of give me convenient access to my history. But fish is great until you run some sort of esoteric bash script, and then it all explodes in your face.
Yeah.
So this could bring me back to bash.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this works with Zshirt as well, if you're a Zshirt person.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah. That's really nice.
This is really good. And there's a little video, like animated like terminal showing you what it does on the GitHub page, which I notice, calling back to a previous thing we talked about last week, they use Terminator in their little video. But yeah, that's quite cool. That's I'm quite impressed with that. I think I might have to switch to that. Only in the last few months have I started using Control-R. I've been using Linux and Unix systems for years and years and years. And I just, for some reason, always type the full word history and then pipe it through grep or something rather than just typing Control-R. I don't know why. It's just like built into me. I always type history. So something that's richer that, might force me to use Control-R a little bit more is most welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris, for sending that in.
We love getting your feedback, so please send it to us. Even the pointlessly mean stuff makes us laugh a little bit. If it's short, tweet us on @Ubuntu Podcast. If it's less short, but please no essays, email us on show@ubuntupodcast.org. Or you can leave a comment on the relevant show notes on our website, ubuntupodcast.org. Thank you everyone who has got in touch. We've had loads of feedback lately, and here's this time's. So Fritz Cat left a comment on the website, ubuntupodcast.org.
So for you guys, free speech is only important if it's acceptable free speech and agrees with you. Oh my, those unsavory projects. I have no idea what projects could be considered unsavory. Do they have Nazi Simulator 2015 or something like that, I'm aware? Some of us just value freedom more than others, I suppose. I never seek to silence or blunt opposing viewpoints like GitHub and apparently the Ubuntu podcast hosts choose. I'd let people voice their opinions and then attempt to show them where they're wrong. I think you guys might want to consider a move to OS 10 so you aren't offended by someone's unsavory opinion. Ridiculous to supposedly promote free software and free speech and free as in freedom, but want to eliminate anything that you find offensive.
Wow, what did you guys say while I wasn't here?
What on earth is he on about?
Where did this come from?
It was a news item about GitHub and GitLab, and I think Stuart mentioned, or somebody mentioned, that GitHub have started shutting down certain repositories if they contain dubious content or unsavory content possibly, and Stuart was like, yeah, alright, whatever. I think Alan was a little bit more like, and then by the end of it we're all a bit like,
Well, I'm glad we cleared that up.
Thanks for summarising that, Laura. I remember it clearly now.
Yeah, my additional point was sarcasm is an incredible way to convince people that they're wrong.
Okay.
So Will left a comment on the website as well.
It sounded like you were not totally in agreement about whether or not GitLab was fully open source. Their website is a little unclear. They do offer an enterprise version with extra features for more money, but it seems like the code for that version is open. I guess you pay either for using it as a hosted service or for support in using it on site.
Well, that's good, isn't it?
Yes, and that is how I understand it. The code is open source, and they've got additional services that you can pay for.
Cool.
And David left a comment on the website in response to our discussion about web apps.
I find at present that web apps often go blank, the screen goes completely white and it's stopped working, which is not acceptable. Ubuntu Phone needs to be fixed in regards to this. Native apps are better than web apps, as they're less likely to fail, and web apps only work if your connection is on and working. Also, would you list the apps you mentioned, especially the one which allows a person to read Kindle books on the Ubuntu phone? I did not catch the name you said. And the apps were Telegram, encrypted instant messaging like WhatsApp, CChat, reading Kindle ebooks, Notes, writing notes synced with Evernote, and UDrop Cabin, a basic mobile client for Dropbox, all in the software center.
So his point about web apps often go blank, yes, and this is a known bug in the web browser, and partly I know it's being worked on because I was sat next to the guy working on it today. And part of the reason for that is the browser has, and you may not care about this, you just want it fixed, I'm sure. But the browser is multiple components. There's the web browser app itself, which is like the Chrome around the edge of the window that draws the window and manages the URLs that you're looking at and the history and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the rendering part, which is called Oxide. And sometimes on a phone which has a limited amount of memory, one of them gets killed. And unfortunately, it's usually the one that's doing the rendering. And so what you end up with is a white page, or it can be the other way around. You end up with a white page because one of the two has been killed. And so it's kind of half still running. And that can be frustrating. And yes, it's being worked on.
So what you need is a swap partition on the phone for when you run out of memory.
Well, so the other point that they made was native apps are better than web apps because they're less likely to fail. I'm not entirely sure I agree with that either. Because, applications can fail in a myriad of ways as well because they're complicated code bases. And to fix them, someone has to fix them and then deploy them back out to all the people who have that app installed. Whereas with a web app, if it's the website that has the problem, then potentially they can just deploy a fix, if it's at the remote end, and everyone gets the benefit instantly. You don't have to, redeploy the app out to all the users. So it swings and roundabouts a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Pixelated Pete also left a comment on the website about the web app discussion.
Thanks for the really interesting discussion around web apps. Sounds like you're saying there are two types. Apps that use web technology, HTML, CSS for presentation and JS for the logic, and apps that just present the web. There are some very good examples of apps that use web technology, including the Atom editor for the desktop. However, I think apps that present web pages are doomed to nearly always be disappointing, not because they are bad, but because they promise an experience greater than using the browser but do not deliver. It would be fair to say that the Ubuntu Phone Edition is aiming to be a platform for the former, which bodes well, but currently there are too many of the latter.
Yes. I think I agree with that. Yes.
I'd agree with that as well.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely convinced I would hold Atom up as a shining example. I've been using it as my default editor for a while, and it's so slow to start up. And for a text editor, I just want to edit a file and then save it and then go. And to have to wait multiple seconds for the thing to start up on a i7 with an SSD just seems a bit ridiculous. So I'm not sure Atom is a shining example of a great web technology app, personally.
My shining example of a text editor is Notepad opening. Notepad opening on Windows is quicker than Gedit in my experience.
Vim.
Pardon?
What? Sorry?
What did you say?
Vim.
Oh, Vim. Well, yeah, all right, whatever. So, moving on. Will left a comment on the website about the Firefox add-ons announcement that we mentioned in the last show.
There are major changes that will break the majority of add-ons and just plain prevent the features of many of them. These changes will make Firefox likely give Firefox more performance and security, but make it much less customizable. The main differing advantages of Firefox over Chromium, not Chrome, so that we're comparing free software with free software, to me was customizability. I'm not sure where the differentiation will be now. Are they going to make a browser that has better performance and security than the one with Google's resources behind it? Yeah, that's a good point.
Much like the points we were making earlier, in fact.
Yeah.
So Thea Murphy emailed show@ubuntupodcast.org.
Firstly, I've been listening to the show for years and I love the show, but I do miss the Wing Commander.
So do we.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask if you can do a segment on Ubuntu Mate versus Mint Mate. Are there any differences in the look or software packaging versions? Also, why choose one over the other? Is there better support via Ubuntu and Canonical? Is there better forums via Mint? Or is it just personal preference? Well,
of course, we're completely impartial on this show.
We could do that, but we don't need to.
No, we don't need to. And I don't want to suffer the ridicule of my friends. So I've actually discussed this on a couple of other podcasts.
You're going to get them to email in then.
Oh, why do I turn up?
It's going to be a long 4 hours, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be a long 4 hours, and I'm driving, so be good. So there's the Mintcast podcast, which is hosted by Joe Ressington, and in Mintcast episode 220, I talked about Ubuntu Mate, and we did discuss the differences and similarities between Ubuntu Mate and Mint Mate. So I suggest you have a listen to that, and that gives some good background. More recently, I was interviewed by Total OS Today, and the topic of Mint Mate versus Ubuntu Mate came up there. So have a listen to that one. And then again, plugging another Joe Ressington podcast, I was interviewed for the Pi podcast episode 1, where we talked about Ubuntu Mate on the Raspberry Pi. But one of the questions that was brought up by Isaac Carter is which distribution would someone use if they wanted to create a distro on the Raspberry Pi, and that had some conversation about the differences between Ubuntu Mate and Mint Mate with regards to architecture support. So we'll have links to those 3 podcasts, and if you listen to those, hopefully it'll answer all your questions.
Excellent. Thanks, Martin. That's a most comprehensive feedback answer I think we have ever given.
I aim to please.
That's all for episode 26. We'll be back next week when we'll have more news, comment, and discussion.
And maybe interviews.
Oh, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yes, maybe. If you want us to interview someone, let us know who you'd like us to interview. show@ubuntupodcast.org.
Indeed.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
See you next time. Bye. Bye. Ubuntu Mate.